Welcome to our channel. Today, we're diving into a topic that's about as comfortable to discuss as, say, performing your own root canal. Reparations. Now, before you click away faster than a politician fleeing a tough question, just hear me out. There are more misconceptions swirling around reparations than there are mosquitoes at a nude yoga retreat in the Everglades. And much like those mosquitoes, we're here to address the buzzing and shed some much-needed light on the situation. Having an honest conversation about the legacy of slavery and its ongoing impact on Black communities isn't about pointing fingers. It's about acknowledging the systemic inequalities that persist to this day and exploring ways to address them. So buckle up, grab your thinking caps, and let's get into it. All right, let's address the elephant in the room. The idea that reparations are just about handing out giant novelty checks. Direct cash payments can be one aspect, but it's like saying a car is just four wheels and an engine. Reparations go beyond financial compensation. It's about addressing systemic disadvantages. We're talking about education, healthcare, housing, and business ownership. Comprehensive reparations aim to level the playing field, not just throw a few bucks at the problem. Now, let's address another common misconception. Reparations aren't about pointing fingers and assigning blame for the sins of the past. We can all agree that slavery was a horrific chapter in human history. Reparations are about acknowledging the lasting legacy of slavery and its impact on generations of Black Americans. It's about addressing the harm caused and working towards a more just and equitable future. Let's address the elephant in the room, or rather, the elephant some people are using to avoid a necessary conversation. Reparations are too expensive, they cry, clutching their pearls. We're already paying for the legacy of slavery and systemic racism. The economic disparities, the mass incarceration, the healthcare inequalities, all of these cost us trillions. We're pouring money into systemic injustice when we could be investing in communities, education, and healthcare. That's not just good morals. That's good economics. Addressing systemic racism is the roof repair America needs. The cost of inaction? That's a bill we can't afford to keep paying. Now, some people like to draw very specific, very neat little lines when it comes to who deserves reparations. My family didn't own slaves, they'll say, as if systemic racism is a subscription service you can simply opt out of. Why should I pay for something I wasn't directly responsible for? Well, for starters, systemic racism isn't like inheriting your great-aunt's collection of porcelain thimbles. It's not about individual blame, it's about acknowledging the systems that continue to benefit some while actively disadvantaging others based solely on the color of their skin. Imagine a river polluted upstream by generations of industrial waste. Now, are the people living downstream any less impacted by that pollution because their families didn't personally dump chemicals in the water? Of course not. They're still drinking, bathing, and living with the consequences. Systemic racism works the same way. Black communities have been systematically disadvantaged for centuries, denied opportunities, resources, and basic human dignity. Reparations aren't about punishing individuals. They're about cleaning up the river, so to speak, and creating a future where everyone has the chance to thrive. And finally, we arrive at the argument that would make even the most patient kindergarten teacher consider investing in a lifetime supply of whiskey. Reparations are unnecessary, because apparently everything is magically fine now. Racism? Poof! Gone. We all woke up one morning and decided to start fresh, right? If only, folks. If only. The reality is, the legacy of slavery and Jim Crow didn't just vanish into thin air. It morphed. It adapted. It burrowed its way into every facet of American life, from housing and education to healthcare and the criminal justice system. To say reparations are unnecessary is like strolling onto a dilapidated, termite-infested porch, pointing at the peeling paint and crumbling floorboards, and declaring, "Looks structurally sound to me. No need for repairs here." Except, in this case, the house is American society, and the people forced to live with the crumbling foundation, the leaky roof, and the occasional family of metaphorical raccoons are Black Americans. Ignoring the problem doesn't make it go away. It just makes us complicit in perpetuating the very systems that created the problem in the first place. All right, let's tackle this whole reparations equal division myth, shall we? It's like saying, if we acknowledge this giant elephant in the room, it'll suddenly turn the room into a zoo. It's about finally confronting the elephant, acknowledging it exists, and maybe, just maybe, finding a way to coexist peacefully. Reparations done right can be a powerful step towards acknowledging past wrongs, fostering understanding and building a more equitable future for everyone. And that, my friends, is something that should unite us, not divide us. The Constitution isn't some ancient, immutable monolith. It's a living document, meant to reflect evolving values. Remember the 14th Amendment? It addressed grave injustices. It granted citizenship and equal protection under the law. Reparations aim to rectify similar injustices today. We are far from perfect in addressing systemic racism. The legal framework for reparations can be established. Ah yes, the too complicated argument. Figuring out the logistics of reparations won't be a walk in the park. But you know what else is complicated? Brain surgery, rocket science, and filing your taxes after a freelance career. Yet, somehow, we manage to do those things. Saying something is complicated is a cop-out, a way to avoid having the hard conversations. It's like saying we shouldn't bother trying to solve climate change. There are already numerous successful models of reparations. Germany has been paying reparations to Holocaust survivors for decades. And in the United States, we have the Civil Liberties Act of 1988. It provided reparations to Japanese Americans interned during World War II. Implementing reparations will require careful planning and community input. But to say it's too complicated is simply an excuse. It's time to stop hiding behind the excuse of complexity and start having the difficult but necessary conversations about how to make reparations a reality. All right, let's address this head-in-the-sand argument, shall we? Some folks claim reparations are outdated, a relic of the past. But demands for reparative justice are gaining traction. From the United States to the Caribbean to Europe, people are waking up to the lingering consequences of colonialism and slavery. Those apologies came with commitments to exploring reparations. They manifest in wealth gaps, health disparities, and educational inequities. The demand for reparations isn't going anywhere. It's a global movement demanding accountability and a just future. Now, this myth is a classic. It's the "but everyone I know agrees with me." Argument, usually uttered while nervously adjusting a monocle. The claim is that most people oppose reparations, so it's a fringe idea. Well, buckle up, because public opinion is a fickle beast. Remember when smoking was considered cool and seatbelts were for cowards? Yeah, things change. And on the issue of reparations, the ground is most definitely shifting. Recent polls show a significant increase in support, particularly among young people who, unlike some of us, weren't raised on a steady diet of misinformation and historical whitewashing. These aren't just abstract numbers, folks. This is a reflection of growing awareness, particularly among those who will inherit the mess previous generations have left behind. They understand that true justice requires more than empty apologies or symbolic gestures. It requires action, investment, and a commitment to righting historical wrongs. So, while the majority argument might have held water a few decades ago, it's quickly drying up. Public support for reparations is on the rise, and frankly, those clinging to the old ways are starting to sound like that one uncle at Thanksgiving who still thinks email is a fad. Right, let's nip this one in the bud, shall we? The notion that reparations are some sort of charitable handout is frankly insulting, like offering someone a coupon for a free pizza after you crashed your car into their living room. It fundamentally misunderstands the entire concept. Reparations aren't about pity or charity. They're about acknowledging the systemic and deliberate harm inflicted upon Black communities for centuries. This isn't about a feel-good donation. It's about rectifying a historical debt. It's about addressing the fact that the prosperity of one group was built on the backs and exploitation of another. Imagine, if you will, a group of kids playing Monopoly. Now, imagine one kid gets to start with all the money, all the properties, and the other players are forced to give him a cut of their earnings every time they pass go. Now, tell me, would it be charity to finally level the playing field after decades of this rigged game? No, it would be an act of basic fairness. And that's exactly what reparations are about. Fairness, justice, and acknowledging that sometimes saying sorry just isn't enough. You need to actually fix the damn board game. Alright, next up on our reparations myth-busting tour is this gem. Reparations would just line the pockets of wealthy Black people. Now, ignoring the inherent weirdness of assuming all Black folks are rolling in dough, let's unpack this, shall we? This argument conveniently forgets that systemic racism doesn't magically disappear once you hit a certain income bracket. It also ignores the very real disparities that exist in the Black community, often due to, you guessed it, the legacy of slavery and segregation. The point of reparations isn't to hand out blank checks to anyone who ticks a certain box. It's about targeted programs and initiatives designed to address specific, deeply ingrained inequalities. Think healthcare access, educational opportunities, business loans, things that actually level the playing field. Oh, this is a good one. Reparations are too politically charged. You know what else is politically charged? Existing. Look, I get it. Talking about race and the sins of our past is about as comfortable as a prostate exam conducted by a honey badger. But here's the thing. Just because something is uncomfortable doesn't mean we get to shove it under the rug and pretend it doesn't exist. Ignoring injustice doesn't make it go away. It just allows it to fester and grow like a particularly virulent strain of mold in your basement. Having honest and, yes, potentially difficult conversations about reparations is the only way to move toward a more just and equitable society. Avoiding the issue just perpetuates the very systems of oppression that reparations seek to address. And finally, we arrive at the reparations are a newfangled, radical idea argument. Ah, bless their cotton socks. It's adorable when people try to rewrite history, isn't it? Because, you see, reparations are about as modern as the concept of colonialism, which is to say, not at all. From post-World War II Germany to the redress for Japanese internment camps in the US, history is littered with examples of nations grappling with their past and, yes, paying reparations for their wrongs. So, no, this isn't some trendy new idea cooked up by woke millennials. It's a centuries-old practice of acknowledging harm and attempting to right historical wrongs. To pretend otherwise just shows a staggering level of either ignorance or willful blindness. And frankly, I'm not sure which is worse. The dependency argument. This is a classic. It suggests that if you give black communities reparations, they'll just become reliant on handouts. But give someone a leg up, and suddenly they'll never work another day in their life. The reality is, reparations are about empowering communities, not creating dependency. It's about providing resources for education, healthcare, and business development. It's about finally giving black communities a fighting chance to thrive, not just survive. Right, so the argument here is that reparations would only benefit the generation that receives them. Because apparently, the effects of centuries of systemic oppression magically disappear after a single generation. It's like saying, sure, we systematically disadvantaged your family for generations, but we're pretty sure your grandkids will be just fine. This argument ignores the ripple effect of historical injustices. The legacy of slavery and Jim Crow continues to impact black communities today through the wealth gap, mass incarceration, and limited access to opportunities. Reparations aren't just about righting past wrongs, they're about creating a more just and equitable future for all. It's about breaking the cycle of poverty and disadvantage that has been passed down for generations. Think of it like this. If your grandparents were denied a proper education because of segregation, that would likely impact their children's opportunities, and then your opportunities as well. It's not about a single generation, it's about addressing the long-term consequences of injustice. By investing in black communities today, we're investing in a better future for everyone. It's about creating a society where everyone has a fair shot, regardless of their race or the circumstances of their birth. Yes, the old "but what about my wallet?" argument. It's an argument as old as time itself. Funding reparations doesn't have to come solely from tax increases. It can involve reallocating existing budgets, or even exploring corporate contributions. Investing in social justice isn't just about dollars and cents. It's about creating a more equitable and prosperous society for everyone. Sometimes, creating a better future requires a collective investment. Think of it like investing in infrastructure. The long-term benefits far outweigh the initial costs. By investing in marginalized communities, we're investing in society as a whole. All right, let's tackle this one head-on, shall we? Black communities aren't deeply divided on reparations. Sure, there are disagreements on specifics, like direct payments or education investment. The vast majority agree systemic racism has screwed them over for centuries, and something needs to be done about it. highlighting minor disagreements distracts from the overwhelming consensus. The real division is between those benefiting from the status quo and those fighting for justice. All right, let's address this elephant in the room. The idea that reparations are simply too difficult to implement fairly. It's a tempting argument, right? How do you quantify centuries of systemic oppression and discrimination? How do you untangle the web of injustices in our society? Saying something is difficult is not the same as saying it's impossible. We've landed people on the moon. We've mapped the human genome. Surely we can address the legacy of slavery and Jim Crow. The key is careful planning and active engagement with affected communities. Now, some cynics out there might say, even with perfectly implemented reparations, systemic racism will still exist. So what's the point? And you know what? They're not entirely wrong. Reparations on their own are not a magic bullet. They won't magically erase centuries of ingrained inequality overnight. Think of it like this. If you've got a broken leg, you wouldn't just slap on a band-aid and expect to run a marathon. You need a cast, physical therapy, maybe even surgery. Reparations are just one part of a much larger healing process for our society. They're about addressing the root causes of inequality, not just the symptoms. We're talking about investing in education, healthcare, housing, and job training for marginalized communities. We're talking about criminal justice reform, voting rights, and dismantling discriminatory policies that continue to plague us today. It's a monumental task, no doubt about it. But the fact that it's difficult doesn't mean we shouldn't even try. Because every step we take towards a more just and equitable society is a step worth taking. Well, folks, there you have it. A whirlwind tour through the minefield of myths surrounding reparations. We've debunked, we've dissected, we've hopefully given you enough information to make your own informed opinions. If you found this video even remotely enlightening, or perhaps just enjoyed my delightful British accent, please do give it a like, share it with your friends, family, that weird neighbour who always wears a bathrobe outside. You know the one. And of course, subscribe to the channel for more myth-busting, truth-seeking content. But most importantly, keep the conversation going in the comments below. Let's talk about reparations. Let's talk about racial justice. Let's talk about how we build a better future together. Until next time, stay informed.